Welcome back to the Resting in Uncertainty Foundation series. We're now on the final module, Module 5, where I'm going to be talking about the Kilby Inquiry Method, which is the primary methodology that I use in supporting my clients to heal trauma, to dissolve underlying self-deficiency stories, lack of self-confidence, and other tendencies that get in our way with being in the flow with life, and also in our ability to take effective action in life. So we talked about we had the experience in the last module of resting in presence, of resting in awareness. And what you saw in that experience is that awareness, that presence is already always there. And in the practice of resting in presence is about bringing that background that's always there to the foreground so that we begin to get to experience with regularity that supporting us, because it always is there to support us. It's almost as if we haven't learned how to sleep and we're learning how to sleep, right? Once we learn how to sleep, it's great. It's the same thing here. When you learn how to rest in the primary underpinning of being human, you begin to open up a whole new set of possibilities for yourself as a human being. And this is foundational to the Kilby Inquiry Method work, is that the foundation is resting in presence. And if you're able to do that at all times, there's nothing else you have to do. You will have a different relationship with life. You'll be more in the moment without effort. And you'll be more in flow, because that's the natural orientation and way of being of a human being. That said, what happens when we're emotionally triggered? That happens to all of us. We're in the grocery store. Somebody cuts in line. We have an expletive that shows up in our mind, and a sense of, anger arises. And it's if there's anything we can do about it. It's going to happen. Or we're having a great day with our significant other, and then we get in an argument and we go into separate rooms. Or we have a day planned, and it's a very important day for us, but something occurs that pulls the rug out from under the plan. These are various ways that we get triggered. And so what do we do then? It's hard to find rest many times when we're in this place. And what's happening again is the unconscious underlying beliefs are driving our reactiveness, as we've talked about before. And it matters very little in these situations when we're triggered what we tell ourselves consciously. Be patient, calm down. Try not to say what you want to say, what you really want to say, because your unconscious beliefs always override, or in most cases override, conscious affirmations we tell ourselves. Again, it's all about what's underneath the water that's driving most of our behaviors. What's in that unconscious or subconscious part of the iceberg within us. So what do we do about it? Well, here's where the Kilby Inquiry Method comes in. I've had the great fortune of working directly one-on-one with Scott and being certified in the Kilby Inquiry Method. And as I said, it's the primary methodology that I use in my work with my clients around healing self-deficiency stories, lack of confidence, etc. And Scott is the author of 7 books. He's a sought-after speaker and a passionate expert on the subject of mindfulness. Scott's also traveled the world extensively, giving lectures and workshops and intensives on this topic. He's also a well-respected addiction specialist and the founder of the Kilby Center for Recovery, that is forwarding a revolutionary new model for addiction recovery that is turning the addiction recovery community on its ear, because this work around mindfulness and the specific methodology of the Kilby Inquiry Method has helped hundreds of individuals get free from addiction. So what's happening, Scott discovered, or how he frames this, is when we are triggered, we're experiencing what Scott calls the Velcro effect. So in essence, this is a illustration of kind of what happens when the Velcro effect takes hold in us. Let's go back to the grocery store example. We're standing in line, somebody cuts in front of us. The thoughts and images that first come forward may be an expletive about that person and all the reasons why that's unfair. That can immediately emerge in the mind when we're triggered. Along with that, there may be a sense of heat in the body showing up and a turn in our stomach and a contraction in our shoulders. And those are the feelings and bodily sensations that are occurring almost at the same time. And that connection between the thoughts and images and the feelings and bodily sensations are the Velcro effect. And what's occurring there is it's really tapping into something even more deep in us, which is related to our various identifications or core beliefs or fixations that we have about how the world should work, right? The problem is we might have the right to have these reactions, but the reactions themselves don't serve us. They don't allow us to be in the most effective position to do something about whatever situation we're facing, because we're off center. We're out of rest, right? So the whole emphasis of the Kill Be Inquiry work is dissolving the Velcro effect through presence and inquiry. So using that same simple example, it's looking at those first looking at those thoughts and images that appear, the expletive about that person, the judgment about the unfairness of the situation, or whatever else arises, and simply holding those thoughts and images in our awareness and looking at them through awareness. And also deploying some other things that support us and helping us to dissolve those thoughts and images. And then separately, once those thoughts and images are dissolved, to go into the feelings or bodily sensations that we're experiencing, that heat, that turn in the stomach, that tensing of the shoulder, and allow them to be there and observe them in awareness. And when we do that, what tends to happen is those feelings and bodily sensations may move around a little bit, but eventually what happens is they dissolve. And thus the Velcro effect dissolves. And our identifications and fixations that may be related to that situation, also a piece of them may begin to dissolve. Now, it's an oversimplification, and it would be unfair to say that you do one and you're done. This is not about that, but this is about attending to a healing process over time that can be self-generated once you learn the system, as all my clients will as they work with me, to begin to take control of yourself rather than those unconscious underlying conditions controlling you. And when that happens, you're expanding presence and the experience of presence. You're creating more room for that essential underlying nature to express itself, which leads to many positive outcomes. The ability to be less reactive, the ability to be more centered, to find greater peace and joy, etc. What this work can bring to you is a reduction in reactiveness and suffering that ensues from that. It can help dissolve self-deficiency stories and beliefs. It can help you move away from judgment of self and others that is so debilitating to us. It can help heal compulsive tendencies. And it can help you increase in confidence and certainty in the face of uncertainty. You see, circumstances are not the cause of your reactions. Your reactions are built in that 95% or the submerged part of the iceberg. And once we begin to consciously attend to those things, we are able to be much more free and flow and effective at all times in our life, no matter what the circumstances are. And this really points to the healing power of presence. And it can be kind of hard to grasp this is something you'll have to experience. But when we see something clearly as awareness, as our true selves, it automatically starts to dismantle beliefs and stories that are unconsciously control us. And the KI method also integrates other tools that have been proven and effective at resolving beliefs held in by the nervous system, which I'll talk about a little later. And the system is also safe because it's designed in such a way that does not re-traumatize or connect us more strongly to these underlying beliefs that we're trying to look at and dissolve. So let's take a look at how this might work for a lack of confidence. Let's say I have this thought, I'm not confident. And there might be this image of not looking good when we give the speech, or afraid to pick up the phone and call somebody that we need to connect with because we don't believe we'll have some validity for them. Well, whatever it is, there's usually other thoughts than I'm not confident that are related to that. This is the generality of one thought we might have. And what we want to do in this process is we're looking at something underneath that may come up, like a belief I'm not good enough. So when we look at these words and images, again, we look at them separately. We pull them out and we hold them in our awareness. And we may engage some of the other modalities that are embedded in the Kiloby inquiry method to help us to dissolve those words and images. We then turn to the sinking feeling in our chest and we allow ourselves to dance with it, to be with it, to allow it to move. But what we're doing is we're validating it. We're allowing that to be there. We're not resisting it. And paradoxically, as you might have heard before, what you resist persists. So if we don't like how we're feeling, we're actually holding on to it. But when we welcome it and we rest with that sinking feeling in our chest and allow it to move where it moves, again, it dissolves. And when that happens, the Velcro effect begins to dissolve. And we begin to have this sense of expanding presence. And this is what typically happens in almost every session with one of my clients. They'll walk in completely triggered, upset about something that occurred, upset about some judgment they're having about the world or another person, and they may recognize, I don't want to have this. But by doing this method, they walk away from the session feeling free at a certain level. Again, as you see, the I'm not good enough is still there potentially, certainly in the individual. There might be a lot more work they have to do to really let go of that core belief. However, it has taken a hit. It's been dismantled a bit. And as you do more and more inquiry, you can completely dissolve those self-deficiency stories. That's the power of this work. Now let's look at compulsions. Same thing. What are compulsions? The compulsions, while they cause a lot of problem, are not the real problem. Certainly, these things cause problems, but what we tend to do in recovering addictions and compulsions is we try to stop the behaviors in some way. And this is why I think some of the methods that are currently out there don't work so effectively. What we have to do is go after the self-deficiency story and the shame that is the true cause of why we go to addictive substances. So in the Kiloby inquiry method, what we would do is if you, let's say, were using some kind of drug or alcohol or some kind of other addictive substance, we get to the heart of why are you using it? And we begin to look at those self-deficiency stories, again, over time, and the shame, and use the method to begin to dissolve those stories. And then we'd also look at what is happening in the body when we feel the urge to go use. And we begin to look at those contractions that are occurring or those physical sensations and feelings that are occurring and begin to honor them and look at them in awareness. And as we do that, they begin to dissolve. And of course, the Velcro dissolves and we find ourselves in more presence. I have had a direct experience of this with an addiction that I had that no longer dogs me. And it baffles me. It dogged me for 24 years. And it's now gone. Where did it go? Well, I had to look and do some real work at looking what drove that, which was a self-deficiency story of I'm broken and there's something in me that can't be fixed. And when I was able to begin to create greater space and presence around that, the urge and the need to use the addictive substance fell away. So here's the process, the KI process, method process in a nutshell. It all is bounded and grounded in this place of natural rest, of learning to be in awareness and look through awareness, and having that as a fundamental practice and orientation for our being. And then when we're looking at something that's triggering us, we ask, how am I being triggered? We then look, what does this mean about me that I'm being triggered? And what this does is it consciously perturbs those unconscious reactions and beliefs and brings it to the surface so we can see it. It takes it again from underneath the water of the iceberg and brings it to the surface where we can see it. And we'll then look at what the words and images do you notice? And we'll work with those in a particular way that dissolves those, right? And then the feeling, and then we'll drop into the feeling into the sensations that we're feeling and dance with the sensations and allow them to dissolve naturally. And then what we're doing is we're doing the unvelcroing process. And again, this is very difficult to describe conceptually because you can't get it conceptually, but as you experience it, this is what's happening. There's a science to this work. Now we have other integrations that we also fold into the work. One is called the emotional freedom technique. Some people call it tapping. And then there's also an element of eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, that is also brought into this. And the idea behind this is that we're using these methods to support, dissolving these fixations that are in our nervous system. And these techniques have been shown as very powerful resources for doing that. And they stand on their own as very powerful techniques. But what we've done with the Kiloby Inquiry Method, or what Scott has done, is he's brought these things in to reinforce and empower the method of looking. And they're very powerful and useful. The whole goal of this work is for you to become self-reliant, to learn how to do this on your own. And I encourage the clients that I work with that do the best are those that do work daily in their inquiry and their rest practice. And then the sessions are far more powerful. And the whole goal is to teach you this, so at some point you don't have to rely on the facilitator. The goal is to get myself out of work with you as we work together. So what's required for the KI method to work? Willingness to turn your attention towards your unconscious schemas. That can take some courage. A lot of times we don't want to look at the painful aspects in our life. We don't want to look at the anxieties and the self-deficiency stories and the bad feelings, the shame. But that's the only way we can do it. But as you do the work of doing that, you begin to appreciate and even lean into looking for those things because you know you have a way to dissolve them. It's also learning to trust presence. Going back to this slide I said earlier, that the most powerful healing force, certainly of emotional trauma and self-deficiency stories and negative core beliefs, is the power of bringing them into awareness. And that is a healing force. Also, your own self-honesty, your willingness to be honest about what's really happening. That also will teach you how to be that way all the time, but you'll begin to gain a greater value for this self-honesty as the work's done. And finally, there's earnestness or consistent effort. When that is applied, the impact of this work is profound. So what gets in the way of being effective in this work? You may still be attached to how you look at the world and to your beliefs. So if you're more attached to the beliefs and how you look at the world than healing, this is not going to work for you. You have to be ready to let go of any belief that's taking you away from being at rest. The discomfort of looking can sometimes stop you from looking. And I've had this experience too. And I've had to have a talking to with Scott a couple times about this. And I have to do this with my clients. You have to really learn how to value that discomfort. Life has painful aspects to it. When we turn away from that, we're turning away from a good portion of life and the lessons we can learn in life. Then this process teaches how to do this with artistry and mastery. A lot of people say, I know better, I just have to stop engaging these behaviors. We hear addicts say this all the time, I just got to stop. Right? Or, you may believe also that strongly that looking will do no good because it's a behavioral issue. Behavior is a symptom. Yes, it causes problems, but it is not the ultimate problem. There's also what we call spiritual bypassing. And I had gotten a PhD in this myself, and I bring this up because it caused me a lot of unnecessary suffering. What I mean by spiritual bypassing is, like you might say, I don't want to be negative or attract negative things by looking at this sense of deficiency. If I look at my deficiency, aren't I going to create more of that in my life? It's already running the show unconsciously. If you don't bring it to the conscious surface, you're never going to heal it. Finally, I know everything is one. I should not feel this way. So we have these spiritual principles that we say, everybody says everything's one and just live in the moment. I'm just going to do that. Well, that is done in a conceptual way through the mind. It never will be realized. And finally, it's just another practice that won't work. Sometimes we get jaded because we've been on the spiritual path for, let's say, 25 or 30 years or longer, and we've tried so many things, and they, quote unquote, didn't seem to work. Well, again, this will be self-proven as you do the work. And it's just to be aware of, give it some time as we move forward. And what this all leads to is greater freedom. The goal of the Kill Bee Inquiry Method is to help you have a greater freedom of movement, a greater access to peace and joy and freedom that comes from releasing yourself from being imprisoned by these self-deficiency stories and core beliefs that harm you and harm others. So that's the end of this Foundations course, Resting in Uncertainty. I hope you found value in this course. And again, I work with clients one-on-one, supporting them to gain this greater freedom and ability to meet life moment to moment in flow. And you can learn more about my work at boundlesslife.org, or you can email me at davidcraig@boundlesslife.org. And there's other resources available on my website, ways to communicate with me, ongoing blogs, etc. So I welcome you to take a look at that. And I want to thank you again for your time and attention and participating in this course. Have a great rest of your day or evening. Bye-bye.